The air in the Arctic doesn't behave like air anywhere else on Earth. It doesn't float, it presses. Like the sky itself has lowered its weight onto the ice, asking everything beneath it a silent question. How badly do you want to stay alive here? There are no forests to break your outline, no walls to hide behind, no background noise to swallow your breathing, just white stretching into white until your mind starts inventing shapes just to feel less alone. And that's where the problem begins. 'Cause in a place like this your instincts stop being comfort and start becoming alarm bells you can't shut off. Most people imagine the Arctic as empty, but emptiness is a human word. To the things that live here, nothing is empty, everything is accounted for, everything is noticed, everything is remembered. And somewhere out in that silence, something large is moving slower than your fear can keep up with. Not rushing, never rushing, because it doesn't need to. A polar bear doesn't hunt the way wolves hunt or the way lions chase. It doesn't announce itself with chaos. It arrives like a thought you didn't realize you were having. At first, it's just distance. A shape too far away to confirm. A shadow that could be ice, could be rock, could be your imagination trying to protect you from itself, but then it doesn't leave. It stays. And that's when the Arctic changes its tone. Because survival here is not about strength, it's about awareness, and awareness can be manipulated. There are documented encounters where people didn't realize they were being observed, until it was already too late to feel alone. One researcher described it as walking through a white desert for hours, only to later discover something had been following their exact route. Step for step, without ever closing the distance. Not attacking, not fleeing, just learning. And that's what unsettles people the most. Not violence, but patience that feels intelligent. A polar bear doesn't waste energy in the Arctic. Nothing here allows waste. Every movement is calculated against survival itself. Even curiosity becomes strategic. It can smell life under ice thick enough to hold a human truck. It can track movement through wind patterns that erase everything else. Its entire body is designed not for speed, but for certainty. When it commits, it is because the outcome has already been weighed in silence. And sometimes, that calculation includes you. Not as prey in the traditional sense, but as a variable. Something unfamiliar moving through a world that already knows its own rules. There have been moments, rare but real, where travelers in the Arctic describe the feeling of being matched. They walk, something behind them walks too. They stop, the world stops. They turn, nothing is there, but the distance changes anyway. Always subtly closer than before. Always close enough to notice, but never close enough to prove. That's the part that breaks people down mentally long before anything physical happens. Because fear in the Arctic doesn't explode. It accumulates, slowly, quietly, like frost forming inside your thoughts. One expedition in Svalbard recorded unusual tracking patterns around their camp. At first they thought it was random movement, maybe a bear passing through uninterested. But the tracks didn't pass, they circled, wider at first, then tighter. As if something was testing the boundaries of their presence without ever crossing them. Until one morning, the snow just beyond their tents showed compressions deeper than normal, footfalls. Not chaos, not attack. Positioning, as if the bear had already decided where everyone was without needing to see inside. That's the reality most people never want to accept about apex predators. They don't just react, they assess. And in an environment where survival depends on efficiency, assessment becomes everything. There was another case in the Canadian Arctic, where a lone traveler on a snowmobile noticed something unusual in the distance behind him. A shape that didn't disappear no matter how far he drove. At first he thought it was coincidence. A bear crossing paths, nothing more. But hours passed, and every stop he made the shape stopped too. Always far enough to deny certainty. Always close enough to deny peace. When he finally reached a populated settlement, he turned back expecting to see nothing. There was nothing. But not because it wasn't there. Because it no longer needed to be. It had already seen enough. That's the part of polar bears people don't prepare for. Not aggression. Observation. A level of attention that feels almost misaligned with what we expect from animals. But the Arctic doesn't produce soft stories. It produces efficient ones. and efficiency in nature is rarely gentle. Their bodies are built like systems designed for inevitability. Thick layers of fat store survival itself. Massive paws distribute weight so perfectly across ice that failure becomes less likely with every step. Their sense of smell is not just strong, it is reconstructive. It builds invisible maps of life beneath distance and weather. But none of that explains the stillness. The waiting. The way they can remain motionless long enough for a human mind to begin doubting what it saw in the first place. Because in the Arctic, hesitation belongs to the dead. And the polar bear does not hesitate, it endures, it studies, it decides. There is a quiet horror in realizing that you are not just moving through an environment, but potentially through someone else's attention. And attention, in the wild, is never neutral. It always leads somewhere. Sometimes toward curiosity, sometimes toward indifference, and sometimes toward a decision that has been forming long before you ever realized you were part of it. The most unsettling truth about polar bears is not that they can hunt humans. It's that in rare moments they seem to evaluate them first, as if understanding is part of the process, as if recognition itself is a step before action. And when you are in a place where visibility is stolen by weather and sound disappears into snow, you start to understand how easy it is for something enormous to exist just outside your certainty. You don't hear it coming. You notice the absence of everything else first, birds gone, silent, wind shifting direction, your own breath becoming too loud inside your head. And then you realize the Arctic is no longer empty. It is occupied, not with noise, but with presence. And presence is enough, because once something like that is aware of you, the question is no longer whether it will find you. The question is, when it decides you are no longer worth watching. And in that silence, stretched across endless ice, that answer never arrives quickly. It drifts, patiently, just like everything else here.